Guys, welcome. It is Wednesday morning, 9:30, so slightly later than what we normally do. Already had one very well managed trade here. I've just closed out, and we'll obviously talk through that in a bit. But more importantly, let's go on with the news here. All right, and let's obviously speak about CPI data. Even I was surprised, but obviously inflation has dropped, or inflation worries have dropped in the UK. So what does that mean? That, just like the US, it was the other way. The UK is the other way, the other way. So what this means is, the Bank of England has got less pressure to increase interest rates. So naturally, it's going to bring everything down. It's going to bring the price of the pound down. I was expecting it to continue a bit lower. I don't think we've hit our full kind of, fully fledged low yet. However, what it looks like potentially might have been priced in. We got Euro CPI data as well coming out in 23 minutes. So I might leave Euro USD open, but I think I'm going to close out the triggers for AUD USD and for gold this morning. So let's have a look at the dollar. Whereabouts is it? We still haven't hit this 99,500, but obviously it's coming. We're gonna hit it. That is, highest probability is that we're going to pop up, and then we want to see what's happening. I'm expecting a little bit of a relax, so I'm expecting something like this to kind of happen, and then potentially might come up and retest. But obviously, I think tomorrow is the jobs data day for the US dollar, so let's wait and see. Obviously, yields screaming higher, as you can see here. We obviously had this previous high marked. Next kind of target will be this one here. Obviously, nothing is, slowing up. World worries are still, at large here. And then obviously we've got oil still trading above 102. So it's, yeah, it's everything's still obviously not as consistent as we like, but we're coming in. We've had the last week and a half has been very easy for us. This is where times like this macros really pay off because it has been very easy. However, we're coming to that overbought, overbought and oversold kind of, line. So I'm expecting some kind of a pullback, but I'm not sure whether it's going to be this morning, this afternoon, tomorrow, Friday, next week. We're just gonna have to read the data as it comes, So today we got stocks obviously starting to make a push. So we'll wait and see obviously what happens with those. Even things like Tesla still down. It's had a horrible week this week. Dropped from what's it dropped from? Say from Friday, no, Thursday last week. We dropped from 443 all the way down to 394. So just over 10% in the price of Tesla. So yeah, let's wait and see here. I've got a question here from Joe. How is UK job loss increase reported today affects markets? So I can't see any jobs here. So I'm not sure if you're looking at like one star. I tend to only stick to and high impact, news. The only other thing we got from the UK is Governor Bailey speaking. That is all. So I think is it tomorrow? Tomorrow we've also got more inflation data and then jobs data for the US. And then obviously Friday, I can't remember what was on Friday. Let's have a quick look here. So Friday, we've got obviously retail sales, and that's about it. So big, obviously heavy pound week, coming up. So let's start from the back. So USDJPY again stayed away from. Didn't obviously want to trade this. I do think that there's one of these candles coming, but I think it might creep up a little bit higher. As you can see here, really struggling to break higher. There's a lot of worry here. The pricing on USDJPY, this is where you'd stay away. You can see here. So the price range for this week has been yeah, 50 pips, and it's just been going up and down, up and down. So it's a risk either way. I'd say it's probably less of a risk to sell it, but obviously you want to be selling it at these highs as opposed to midway because not a lot is happening right now. If we look at this on a daily time frame, if we look at this on a daily time frame, it's very, very slow. Yeah, very, very slow. So let's wait and see what happens here. Gold, we obviously had this set up here. Wanted gold to pump up a bit. I might hold this here just in case, but I think that this is going to be more of an afternoon. It's not something that I would go aggressive on. Aussie, I'm gonna remove this. Let me remove this right now. So removing, oh, removing the trigger for AUD USD. Here we go. So yeah, gonna stay away from that one. Euro, I'm gonna keep open just in case we do get a nice spike into to here and then a continuation to the downside. And then pound was the beautiful one, perfect trade here. Waited, we're waiting for obviously data to come out, pit one and two, and then it's obviously popped down, nicely. It popped down here originally. We closed this trade out and obviously moved this trade to break even. So if you imagine these are our two trades, we obviously had one here and then we had another one here as well. So if I just put this, say for example here, so we had one there and one there. So this one we closed out. All right, we closed out about here. And then this one we've moved stops to break even, so we covered. I've just said that I've closed out. So all in all, we got 28 pips on this one, and then we got about 14 pips there. So 28, 32, 42 pips. I'm pretty happy with that. Pretty happy. It's a good, nice, trade. Yeah, and obviously it sets us up nicely for the afternoon. So yeah, that's obviously how we've laid everything out this morning. But obviously, like I'd said, I'm a little bit worried now whether dollar has got enough. I think it might have enough to push up to this 99,500, but I do feel like it's due a bit of a rollover and obviously yields too. I do think there's a higher probability that this is going to be tested as opposed to, a little bit higher. Right, let's have a look at this question. Greg, would appreciate if you could explain how you choose entries. I'm going with dollar up, but yields look like they're consolidating a little on a 2 hour. So for me, I would go with uptrend because trend is upwards, but would struggle with entries. Yeah, like I said, right now entries are hard. What I do, right, pre that, you obviously can't be looking to sell the dollar. All right, sorry, you can't. It's crazy trend. So if we were going into euro, you're then kind of, and then let's replay, start new. Let's replay this back to say 6 o'clock. So say 6 in the morning. All right. Now you've got to every day, you've got to identify, all right, how aggressive you want to be. All right. And obviously, all we're doing here is looking for liquidity. All right. If you want to go down some time frames, you can, if it's going to help you, you might have one highlighted here. All right. Which probably wouldn't have been a bad one. You might have one here. There's no right or wrong place to put it because it all depends. Me personally, I didn't want to go too aggressive this morning because I just couldn't. I can't see much more, downwards movement. If you look here from Tuesday, all day we dropped yesterday. So we are due, like always, what goes up must come down, what goes down must come back up to go back down again because it needs to collect, it needs to take some profits here. It needs to come back up, it needs to collect more orders to then have that next kind of flow to push it to the downside. All right. So, that's every morning you've got to wake up and obviously decide how aggressive you want to be. Yesterday we could be a bit more aggressive because we obviously had this nice pop up here. we were then starting to kind of move down. We then had this nice tail up here, right? And I'm pretty sure that was about where our entry was yesterday. So you've always got to identify your kind of risk in regards to how much risk do you want to take on? How's your account doing? Have you been doing well this week? Is it kind of, which I identified this morning, it's kind of middle of the week, so it isn't a day where I want to really push it hard. All right, pound. I waited for obviously the news to come out this morning before I, kind of entered. Then we got this beautiful pop up here. If we look at here, seven. You just go here. So on a lower time frame, so 7 a.m. We were here, popped up nicely because of the data that had come out. Yeah. All right. So, but even then, look how much slower price is kind of, moving. Even pound, we're kind of consolidating here. It's kind of being a bit messy. Yeah. So I do kind of feel that the US dollar at the moment is a little bit overbought. It needs a bit of a relief to then obviously take more orders to execute to come to the downside. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I like pound for this afternoon, but yeah, let's wait and see. Does anyone have any more questions? Any more for any more? Any more for any more? If not, we've got the boot camp later. I think there's about 14, 15 on it. So I'm going to be working, carry on obviously working with that. We're going to do a big macros um, sort of break down some good PDFs today. And then tomorrow we'll just have a big Q&A, and obviously you can, ask me anything you want, and then, yeah, we'll be all good to go. But no, if that is everything, then yeah, I will, catch up with you guys, yeah, a bit later on. I'll be documenting my trades at 1:30 like always. So yeah, have a great day and let's smash it. Have a good one, team.